Hello everybody and welcome to your deadline stream here on the Premier Injuries YouTube channel. As always, we'll be discussing the latest injury news, but we're still in fairly festive spirits over here. Feeling good. I think we're a little bit late today because I was trudging over to the computer. I'm still weighing so much from Christmas Day. I've definitely I might need like an injury update from you, Ben, on when I'll be able to run again, because I just feel so weighty at the moment. I mean, any injury insights into that?
I'm just glad you don't play for Manchester City under Pep Guardiola, Jason, because he'd have you around the running track before you get anywhere near that first team return. So count your lucky stars on that front.
Yes, Pep would punish me, but, you know, I kind of need it at the moment because I put on a fair bit of Christmas timber, maybe some Christmas logs right there. But let's get over the Yuletide discussions for the moment, and let's get into the FPL discussions, because it's game week 20 coming thick and fast, and the games have been very thick and fast through this festive period as well. So we have to discuss what has been happening, and so I guess where to start first with Bournemouth. What is the latest for the Cherries?
Yeah, well, just kick off by wishing everybody a very Merry Christmas. This is the first one we've had in a couple of game weeks and the last one of 2023. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for supporting us throughout the year. It has been fantastic. I know me and Jason have certainly enjoyed it immensely. So, right, without further ado, let's kick off with this week's preview. So we go to the Cherries. We have heard from Andoni Areola. Basically, we're expecting a similar squad to last time out. One potential returner would be Lewis Cook. He has been managing a little bit of a groin issue, nothing too serious, but I wouldn't expect to force his way into that starting 11. The Cherries have been in great form. I think it's unbeaten in 7 since that heavy loss to Manchester City. 6 wins and a draw in that. What we have seen in recent weeks, a little bit of a freshen up of the squad. That's just Philip Bingen and Clivert have been a little bit rotation in and around that, but elsewhere I don't expect a lot of change. Ouattara at left back has been enabled deputy for Curtis. We haven't had any kind of official update, but social media posts did show him in a calm boot or a moon boot, which suggests that there may be some kind of ankle or could potentially be foot or metatarsal. But like I say, there's nothing in there. And of course, Dominic Solanke is the man in form at the moment.
Yes, he is. He's the one that everybody's got their eyes on. But they have on paper, a difficult game against Tottenham. What do you think, though, about their prospects?
I think they'll still go there. They'll certainly have nothing to fear. It's a game that, if they do have aspirations, and there has been talk about Bournemouth potentially pushing for one of those European spots, and the data will reflect where they are going in the league. And, who would have thought that after the first maybe 9 or first 10 game weeks? So the turnaround has been remarkable in both defence and attack. And look, I can certainly see the Cherries taking at least a point from that. They arrive and a lot of confidence, playing really, really well. And of course, Tottenham, we've heard from Postecoglou, and he's sort of lambasting, the schedule and also that ever-growing injury list and players showing a little bit of fatigue. So, yeah, I would, if I was a betting man, I would take Bournemouth not to get beat.
There you go. Manon says, Big Ben, and GV says, good day, good guys. Season's greetings, yes. We're still in very high spirits. Actually, before we move off Bournemouth, GV has said, do you think that Solanke is a captaincy shout for game week 20? What do you think on that, Ben?
Well, he's actually been my captain for the last 3 weeks. So
Really?
there you go. Does that answer your question? Look, I mean, it is, like I say, I do tend to favour captaincy picks for home matches. It isn't an easy game by any stretch of the imagination. But like I say, the form that Bournemouth are in, and if the Cherries are going to score a goal, then you know that Dominic Solanke isn't going to be far away from the goals. And of course, he is brimming with confidence. He may, in his own mind, be looking at a potential move, or certainly potential suitors for a January switch. Arsenal may be on the lookout for a striker. So, like I say, he may be putting himself out there in the shop windows, and he may feel that he can deliver on a bigger stage and at a higher level.
That's a very good point about the shop window scenario as well. And, you've mentioned them there, the Gunners at Arsenal. quite a bad loss to West Ham. They weren't able to put away their chances. Like you said, they could be looking for a striker because of that very reason. But what is the team going to be looking like for game week 20?
Yeah, so no, we're not expecting any real changes in the Arsenal squad. This predicted lineup will be tweaked. As always, we have that massive glut of press conferences late on Friday afternoon. So we're just catching up to that. So Kai Havertz will come back into content. You'd expect him to come in maybe on that left-hand side of midfield and take over from Leandro Trossard. There had been some suggestion that Thomas Partey could recover a little bit sooner than expected. But, I don't really see that in the Premier League. Maybe in the FA Cup, he's a player that could potentially come in. But of course, I think, is he off to AFCON, Jason? You'll be able to tell me with regards to that. And throughout this, what we have heard from managers as it currently stands for those players who are involved in both the Asian Cup and the African Cup of Nations is that conversations are still ongoing with those respective nations. So we don't have any definitive dates on when they leave. But you would suspect that it's probably going to be in and around that FA Cup, with some maybe featuring in the third round ties, and then ultimately some going just beyond that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look up now with the Thomas Partey AFCON, because obviously he'll be going for the tournament with Ghana. But I guess as well, it's his fitness levels. Will he be almost allowed to go? Obviously, the decisions made by the Ghana Football Association, and the fact that he hasn't played until now. Will they want to risk him? I really don't know with that. I think your guess is as good as mine, because, like you said, he's not returned yet, and it's that deadline. Is it the 2nd that these players have to go off?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly on the date. We heard from I'm trying to think. Eric Ten Hag was talking about those discussions and those conversations are taking place. But there was still nothing set in stone. There's another manager that I don't recall who it was. There's been so many this afternoon, but he was saying, oh, it was David Moyes actually, and they were talking about Mohamed Kudus, and they were saying, look, we don't know what's happening. We haven't heard anything, which is very strange. So, like I say, it's a little bit up in the air at the moment, and if the managers of the clubs don't have anything definitive, then I'm left in the dark a little bit. But if anybody's listening on the stream, please feel free to put it in the text box and give us a helping hand.
GV has also brought on a discussion about Arsenal. The famed defence and attack is not working well. I think for that game against West Ham, that is correct. It was another set piece goal conceded. Yeah, it was almost kind of repeat of what we've seen many times this season. I don't know when or if Mikel Arteta is going to sort that one out. And I'm still a little bit bitter because I think that the VAR should have called that first goal out. But the attack is definitely not working well because they're underperforming their XG at the moment. And it goes back to the point there, Ben, that you said right at the start with Solanke. We probably need a better goal scorer than Jesus. But Giandre has said Martinelli has been off for a little bit. Do you think it's time for a change? Do you think Arteta will change him?
I think you might need to freshen things up a little bit in attack. Just touching upon what you're saying there. I think Arsenal had 72 touches in the opposition box last night. And obviously they were on the receiving end of a 2-0 defeat, and potentially, that could have been easily 3-0 had it not been for Ben Rama's late penalty miss or penalty save as it was. So sometimes just a slight tweak, bringing somebody with a point to prove. You're champing at the bit on the bench. Maybe an Eddie Nketiah can potentially come in, and Jesus going out wide is an option, because when things are going well and you're winning games and you're top of the league, it's a difficult conversation to have with a manager. You're vying for places, but ultimately that starting 11 are producing the goods. Well, when it's not going your way, you're going to have those players on the fringes of that team asking questions and thinking, right, well, this is my chance. I want to go out there and I want to show Mikel Arteta what I'm capable of, and I want to go out and do a job for him. So, that maybe opens the door for a Reiss Nelson, like I say, and Eddie Nketiah. We'll wait and see. It wouldn't surprise me to see a couple of changes at least before that next game.
Now, Aston Villa will want to be bouncing back as well. Do you expect any changes in their 11?
Yeah, I mean, Pau Torres isn't 100%. We know he's been carrying that little ankle problem, so that probably locks in Clement Lenge alongside. Now, there's a couple of ways that Unai Emery could go with this. We've seen Konza go out to the right-hand side. But I have brought Matty Cash back into the starting 11. Of course, he was suspended in game week 19. If he didn't bring Matty Cash back into that starting 11, then he could go with Diego Carlos and then put Konza right back out on that right-hand side. Maybe even drop Leon Bailey and push Matty Cash a little bit higher up. So there's a couple of ways that we can go with this. I've also included Diaby just behind Ollie Watkins. And again, Villa are another team. A couple of weeks back we were talking about, or the conversation was around, are these genuine title contenders? And almost now, after, a couple of disappointing defeats, it's now, can they push for that Champions League spot or not? I think, this next month or so is going to be really sort of make or break for this Villa team. They've got some nice fixtures coming up, so they really need to get the points on the board and show that this little blip, show some bounce back ability.
We love bounce back ability. The fact that it's actually in the dictionary as well. Now, game week 20 is going to be too soon for Ivan Toney, but he'll be back for game week 21, which is quite exciting. But what are Brentford doing in the meantime?
Yeah, this is a difficult one to call after a hugely disappointing result midweek at home to Wolves. This is a trip to Selhurst Park. I think we probably expect to see the Bees remain in that 4-3-3 formation. We see Godos playing on that left-hand side with Rosev on the right. Thomas Frank could tweak things ever so slightly. We know sometimes that he does go with that 3-5-2 away from home. He always does against that so-called, that top six, those bigger teams. I just think he will look to freshen things up a little bit. Matthias Jensen probably isn't 100% in where he needs to be in terms of that match fitness and sharpness, but it wouldn't surprise me for him to come back into that starting 11 and maybe get a 55 to 65 minute run out. Also, Mupai back up top alongside Wissa and Lewis. But Johan Wissa could be his last performance before going off to AFCON. Yeah, so this is like I say, it's a difficult call. There are a couple of players that you could potentially interchange. I think Yenalt is a one that's dropped out. I've also threw Damsgaard back in there, and also Frank Onyeka, who will be off to the AFCON as well. He returns after serving a one-match ban last time out.
Now, with the Ivan Toney situation, it might be a bit preemptive to be talking about it, but people will have their minds casting forward to game week 21 and onwards. Do you expect him to hit the ground running? Because it's not an injury, it's maybe match sharpness that he might be lacking, but he'll have probably kept a certain decent level of fitness, won't he?
Oh, absolutely. In terms of that fitness, and he's been playing behind closed doors games for a long time now. So those base levels are certainly there. And what you're going to get back is a player who will be, with the hunger and the desire, to go out and again, prove a few people wrong, prove to himself, after however many months. I think the last time he played competitively was in May. So he's got a point to prove. And again, we touched upon it before with Dominic Solanke. Ivan Toney has, a lot of potential suitors out there. Arsenal, again, being one of those. He has the added appeal that he wouldn't be, he would be eligible for European football. And, those sort of quality players at that level don't come around too often at this stage of the season. And also, Brentford inherently are a selling club. And, we know that the prices in and around January are tend to be fairly inflated. But, Brighton aren't a club that could certainly, hold out for what a 9-digit figure. I think, you could easily tempt them with a high sort of 50, 60, 70. They've prior to the injury to Brian Bremo, they were doing actually quite well in the absence of Toney. They could maybe use that money to reinvest and bolster the squad, elsewhere as well, bring in 2 or 3 players. So, like I say, since they've handled the situation without Toney now for, a lot of months.
Now, with the Ivan Toney situation, would you be getting him back into your FPL team almost immediately? Because, there's the side of it saying, he'll be needing a little bit of match-upness, because obviously behind closed doors games are great, but you can't replicate that competitiveness of the Premier League. But then the flip side is he's going to be coming up against players who've just gone through the, most intense schedule period during the Premier League season, during that Christmas period. There's going to be tired legs, tired brains. He's going to be fully fit and ready. He's going to be way better shape than a lot of people. I mean, could this actually work in his benefit?
I would certainly expect a really strong finish from Ivan Toney during the second half of the campaign. Like you say, when players tend to be coming into a period of the season where they're a little bit tired, a little bit jaded, carrying knocks, niggle, managing ailments, then you have this fully refreshed and hungry Ivan Toney. So with that regard, he's certainly a consideration, and it depends on how you want to play your fantasy sports. What we do know with Brentford and Ivan Toney, he's their talisman. He's their striker. He's their go-to for Thomas Frank. So is he going to get starts? Yes. Is he going to take penalties? Yes. Is he going to play 90 minutes most of the time? Yes. There's three big ticks there. And whether he's, it 100%, and that'll be questionable. I doubt that he's going to hit the, really top optimum levels on a consistent basis, when he first comes in. But at least he's going to be on the pitch. And while he's on the pitch, he's a goal scorer, and he's always going to have a chance of getting some points.
Okay, so let's move from Brentford on to Brighton. And the Seagulls had a fantastic, result against Tottenham. What is the latest team news for them, though?
Yeah, this is another one. This was another late game on Thursday night, so we're waiting for updates here. But Simon Ndringa, that he's probably going to miss the most, the majority of January following a setback. I think that was hamstring related issue. So he's definitely out of the team. We also heard from Roberto De Zerbi talk about how he had 8 confirmed absentees ahead of that game with Tottenham, but there was a couple of players who were in the squad but maybe unable to start games in quick succession. Now I suspect, given the fact that Evan Ferguson has had his minutes managed, that he is one of those. Of course, he was on the bench on Thursday night. I do have him to start. It's going to be between him and Danny Welbeck, probably. Welbeck again is coming off the back of his own issue. João Pedro has been in great form, got himself another race last night. Also, Cameron Matoma, he is out of the Asian Cup, so he's another player who suffered a setback. That was an ankle injury. Initial thoughts were that it was hopefully wasn't too serious, but we're looking at around about 5 to 6 weeks on the sidelines. So you could be looking at the likes of maybe Buonanotte or even Pascal Gross as an option. We've seen Roberto De Zerbi, I think, in terms of using the players, there's no team in the Premier League this season used more players than the Seagulls. So, like I say, I'll be sitting down with this and having a real look through. I haven't even got around to looking at those sort of post-match analysis from Thursday night yet.
Yes, indeed. As always, we say this is a live document, so people will be going, oh, well, he's not put them in the team yet. He'll get round to it. Ben is working very, very hard. We've got such tight deadlines at the moment. One that you've not mentioned there, but he scored a wondrous goal against Spurs. Good old Ivor, our mate Ivor Estupinian. Is he being managed conservatively? Because, obviously he's been out for a while. This is his first kind of game back. Is that why you wouldn't put him in the team?
Yeah, I mean, I dare say Roberto De Zerbi was probably a little bit reluctant to throw him in there at half-time last night. Maybe more minutes than he would have liked. We know that prior to his last injury, he was coming off the back of a hamstring problem and suffered the setback in his first game back. I think that was a Europa League game, maybe Marseille, if my memory serves me correctly. So look, we've had a lot of time on the sidelines. So it is certainly one player that you'd need to manage very carefully. It may be that Estupinian isn't, ready to start in this one, but we are talking, ideal scenarios, and his hand may be forced to start him. And like I say, maybe limited minutes. Certainly not a player that I expect to play 90 minutes after playing 45 on Thursday.
There you go. Giandre said, "Is he not Purvis?" No, he's called Ivor. That's the name that we've given him. It's from one of our earlier broadcasts, Giandre, from maybe last season when we forgot maybe Estupinian's first name. Also, Jondre has said, Jason, were Brighton good or were Spurs just bad? I know you aren't a fan. Yeah, for a long time now, you and I, Ben, have both said Spurs just aren't playing all that well, and so I wasn't surprised with the scoreline. I think they're going to really struggle with Son going, and then who else from the team is going to be going to AFCON? I forget. Is it Sarr and Basuma?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, obviously, Basuma's currently suspended, but he'll be one of the players. Um, wouldn't Doogie? I'm not sure. I don't know if that's a player that's off to the AFCON as well.
But like the team, there's loads of problems with it, and they're going to be losing their talisman in Son, and then also Romero is injured for a while as well. So back to front, the team is going to be severely depleted during this period, and I think it's just going to have a knock-on effect to the rest of their season. I was watching in the Arsenal game at the time, so I can't tell you how bad they played, but just glancing at the data, and even James York from StatsBomb showed that, Tottenham were completely outplayed during that match. But let's turn it to the Clarets, Burnley, and what is the latest from Company, who you always say plays his cards close to his chest. Were they Christmas cards in this press conference?
Uh, touche, Jason, touche. Um, yeah, I mean, again, Vincent Company never gives too much away. Other than the fact that, he said that the squad is in pretty good shape generally. We've seen the return of Josh Cullen over the break, and also Jack Cork is on the cusp of a comeback. That was a calf injury that's kept him out for, I think, around about a month now, but we wouldn't certainly expect him to see him pushing for a start, or certainly an immediate start anyway. Vincent Company doesn't like to make too many changes with his team. We've seen, he's been generally, even when the Clarets were getting beat, he generally managed to stick with the same sort of 9, 10, even 11 players. And that was because he was pleased with performances. But of course, the big news is with Leo Foster. He's back. He spent a little bit of time away, sorting his head out, improving his mental well-being. He looks like he's come back in. He's gaining, that little bit of sharpness and that fitness with every minute playing. So that's great to see him back on the pitches, on the turf more.
Yeah, that's huge news, isn't it? Really, and we wish him, have a successful rest of his season as well. And really important discussions to be had there about mental health, especially in young men. So well done, Lyle Foster, for bringing that to the fore. Chelsea are up next. The Blues have blues at the moment. They're just not playing very well. No consistency. What was interesting was in the athletic discussion that you had a little bit earlier, people were still talking about wanting Chelsea assets. And, I was watching it and I just can't get my head around it. They're so inconsistent. They're really not good at the moment. But there seems to be a lot of love for Nkunku and also Malo Gusto as well. What is the team news, Ben? But also your thoughts on Chelsea?
Yeah, I'm with you, Jason, with regards to Chelsea. I mean, even the win midweek was rather fortuitous. A late penalty sealed all 3 points. They're a team that misses a lot of big chances. And certainly, I mean, Nicholas Jackson does not float me boat. Nkunku is a player that could potentially come in and start ripping it up in the Premier League. But look, there is still it's a risky strategy to be throwing him, straight back in coming off the back of that injury, and also, like I say, his first performances in the Premier League. So it's going to take him a little bit of a time to adjust and acclimate to the rigors of top flight football in England, and he'll not be used to anything that he's had before. So I'd keep my powder dry, certainly with regards to Chelsea players for the moment. This week, we do see the return of Cole Palmer and Raheem Sterling. Both of those players were suspended after accumulating 5 yellow cards. The Sterling looks to be a like-for-like swap with Mudryk now. It isn't confirmed 100% that he's ruled out of the game, but there are certainly doubts over his fitness. I think it just makes sense to throw Sterling back in there. And of course, you cannot leave out Cole Palmer, given the form that he has been in. He's probably one of the few sort of, shining lights for this Chelsea Chelsea team this season, done really well. There was also another concerning setback for Romeo Lavia, signed from Southampton pre-season. He was working his way back to full fitness, hasn't really had much of an opportunity to do anything for the Blues since his arrival. This latest setback is a worry. He's been assessed. Pochettino said, "Look, keep your fingers crossed and hope it isn't anything long term." But as it stands, we simply just don't know. We have Thiago Silva returning to that back line. We know, the veteran defender can't start too many games in quick succession. So him coming in for Barry Shield makes sense after he's dropped midweek.
Now, GV has said, do you think Colwell will start because he was casual in allowing the goal to be scored by Michael Elise?
Who was that, Jason? I missed the actual name there, you said.
Colwell.
Oh, sorry, Colwell. Look, I think Pochettino is a big fan. He does like Colwell. Yeah, his form has dipped a little bit. He has picked up a couple of knocks, had that shoulder injury. I think that kept him out of the England squad. But I certainly, yeah, look, if you would ask me, then Levi Colwell does start for me. You can be forgiven maybe for the mistake. If he was to follow that up with another one, then, again, then there's a bit of a selection decision to be made for the next game.
Now, on to the aforementioned Eagles. Elise is playing very well at the moment, and Roy Hodgson just seems to be eking out those results as per usual. But is there any injury boosts to the team?
The only other, the main one would be the possible return of Odsonne Edouard. That's a knee issue that's kept him out of the last few. He's touch and go. We heard from Roy Hodgson way back on Wednesday. So the problem is, there's a little bit of a time lag between then and kickoff. So there's a lot can happen on the training pitches. He was working away from the squad on Wednesday, but like I say, there was hope that he maybe would be able to join the first team on maybe Thursday or Friday. But then, of course, you need to see if there's any kind of reaction to that previous issue. So that's why there's question marks. And also, Jean-Philippe Mateta hasn't done too bad. So that's why we'll leave him up top for the Eagles.
So continuing over to Everton, the Toffees are playing quite well at the moment. But there are question marks to some in the team, especially Abdoulaye Doucouré in that centre attacking midfield position. At the moment, you've got Garner up top there. But is it, the famed, you've already said it with Roy Hodgson, but touch and go, isn't it, with Doucouré as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Sean Dyche, again, we heard from him early, which gives, there's a little bit of time between that press conference and the actual sort of game kickoff. But what he did say that Doucouré was desperate to be involved. We know that it's nothing too serious, more of a niggling issue. The concern for Sean Dyche and Everton would be throwing him back in too early, suffering a major setback and looking at maybe 4 to 6 weeks on the sideline. So it's a difficult one. I'm making a judgment call with regards to this. I mean, I am starting Andre Gomez as well, in that in itself is a little bit risky, given the lack of competitive minutes he's had over the last, maybe I think it's 18 or so months. Started midweek against Manchester City, done really well, since he's back in. But he is possibly a player that could make way. Garner would drop a little bit deeper and then Doucouré would come in if, Sean Dyche wants to sort of take that chance. So, like I say, if Doucouré comes through without any issues.
There you go. Continuing over to Fulham, who are the team taking on Arsenal this game week. And they played quite well in recent matches. But is there any injury boosts? Oh my God, I can't get my words out. I've got an injury to my mouth. Fulham, what is the latest with them?
Yeah, Willian is the big question mark. And again, he's one that may be changed here. Complained of a little bit discomfort in his hamstring. I think it was ahead of game week 18. He was expected to return and possibly game week 19. Like I say, nothing too serious, but missed out. And like I say, a decision on his availability will be made closer to kickoff. So that's a real sort of 50-50 call. There are lots of options for Marcus Silva. Fulham, the Cottagers, were doing really, really well. Had that little bit of a purple patch, won back-to-back 5-0 games in the league. that downturn has coincided with the loss of Raul Jimenez, but he's back in contention after serving a 3-match ban. His dismissal, I think it was for giving Fabian Shaw, was it a backside in the face, or a bit of it was an unusual sending off at St James's Park anyway, to say the least. So Jimenez back for Fulham, and hopefully, like I say, can change their fortunes around.
So continuing over to Liverpool now, and the Reds will be hoping to extend their stay at the top. They're taking on your boys Newcastle, who we will talk about in a second. But this will be the last game for Salah before he jets off to AFCON. But also Endo will be going as well. So let's talk through the team news, and I guess how you expect the team to set up maybe in the weeks ahead as well.
Yeah, so when Endo sort of departs, he's been deputising for the injured Alexi McAllister. That was a deep knee laceration. I think that was against Fulham as well. A lot more serious than initially thought. That injury, post-match evaluations revealed that the stud actually went through to the bone and cut through muscles, so that's what caused the delay there. But he was hoping to rejoin the group in training today, Friday, and that would potentially give him a chance to return to the matchday squad. But like I say, Endo's last game, I would expect Endo to get the nod with McAllister maybe minutes from the bench. And then, of course, comes through that unscathed, then it would be him going forward for the remainder of January. Elsewhere within the team on that left-hand side of midfield, I am bringing Curtis Jones back into the team, but we have seen Jurgen Klopp potentially sort of flip-flop it with Harvey Elliott and also Ryan Gravenberch. Szoboszlai was another player who dropped out last time out. So, again, there's a little bit of flexibility in that midfield. On the left-hand side at fullback, we know that Andy Robertson is he's not really close to return. It could be, another month before the Scotland international is back and really pushing for a start in that team after dislocating his shoulder playing for Scotland. In attack, the Reds have been boosted by the return of Diogo Jota. He scored on his return to the side midweek. That gives Jurgen Klopp lots of attacking options. I still think it's a little bit too early for Diogo Jota to start. And I have brought Luis Diaz in for Cody Gakpo.
There you go. And so just kind of continuing over with this, John Dre has said this is a big game. Do you have any predictions, Ben? Because obviously it's your boys against the current top of the table, Liverpool. Do you think that you can stop them?
History would tell us no. We have a terrible record at Anfield. I'm trying to cast my mind back to the last time we actually won there. I can't remember if I seen it was 1994 or 1984. It's certainly a long time. And, without the rose tinted or, black and white tinted glasses, the reality is, given the form that we've been in, and how Liverpool have been playing, I would probably take a draw right now.
Do you think the draw is possible, though? Do you think Eddie Howe's just going to kind of set up defensively?
Do you know what? I think, we've shown maybe over the last 18 or so months that we're capable of going anywhere and getting a result against any team. We've had 6 days to prepare for this game. We've had players coming back from injury. I think the return of Sven Botman is massive. It really depends on Eddie Howe and which players he actually brings in. I think, Tino Livramento has been a little bit unfortunate to lose his place following the return of Dan Burn. So that's an interesting one for me. We also may be looking at how he's going to set up an attack with Callum Wilson and Alexander Isak. But it's glass half full time, and I'm going to say 1-1.
Oh, thriller. A thriller 1-1. But you guys will take that. Luton are up next. What is the latest for the Hatters?
Yeah, the Hatters are pretty much as you were. Only one player expected to return to the matchday squad. Everybody else, those long-term-ish absentees remain the same. Is Jordan Clark. He's recovered from illness that kept him out of their win at Bramall Lane.
Right, continuing over to Manchester City, couple of injury blows for them with John Stones. He's ruled out for, I don't know how long, you'll have to tell us about that. But also HAALAND is not returning for this game week. That foot issue is still continuing on. And then there's also latest news on De Bruyne, isn't it, that he's got fatigue, which isn't surprising for how long he has been. So let's talk through that team news. How do you think that's going to play out over the next few game weeks?
Again, the Manchester City team squad should be more or less the same as what we've seen at Goodison Park. The only change to the treatment room, as you alluded to, is the addition of John Stones. That was an ankle problem. We didn't have anything definitive in terms of any time frames or return to play, but suffice to say, Pep Guardiola midweek said, that it didn't look great. However, we have learned, from past expectations to take what he says with a pinch of salt. But I think realistically we're looking at maybe after that, winter break anyway. First and foremost, is sort of Pep maybe looks to utilise the strength and depth of his squad, maybe in the FA Cup. Elsewhere within that City team, we haven't seen Jeremy Doku training with the squad at all. He's still working on an individual program, so to see him return to the squad seems highly unlikely. Erling Haaland, that's a stress-related response, so it'll be one that really will be evaluated on a day-to-day basis. And we're probably looking at somewhere between sort of mid to late January. But again, of course, there are no guarantees with that. So that's a difficult one to sort of ascertain exactly when that's going to come about. Ruben Diaz missed out midweek because of illness. He's one that I could potentially see returning to the squad. And Kevin De Bruyne is training with the team. But like I say, was eased back a little bit due to fatigue. The concerns or the worry is that you don't want to overwork players too much from just to come back in and suffer that setback. So again, we've talked about it on numerous occasions. You're not looking for a 1 and 2 game return. You're looking for that player Kevin De Bruyne, to see out the second half of the season. So like I say, you don't want to be taking any chances and any risks, regardless, of his status within that team. So a return in January is, yes, maybe even an outside chance of featuring in the FA Cup. But like I say, they will want to pick the games and look to protect Kevin De Bruyne accordingly.
Do you think as well he'll be maybe treated more conservatively than we've seen with maybe other players because of the fact that it was a hamstring injury, then he came back? We won't discuss if he came back too early, but some people thought he was rushed a little bit, and then is another hamstring injury, and that was, as you said, they're taking him out for quite a while, and so you don't want to rush him back too prematurely. So kind of the usual comeback for players is this return to play period, and then these protocols. Is there going to be extra ones because of the fact that it was two very similar injuries back to back?
It is a consideration, but I think what Kevin De Bruyne has in his favour, he's had surgery this time, and I understand that there had been ongoing issues, an underlying problem there with Kevin De Bruyne, and why he was maybe suffering these little niggling problems with his hamstrings. So that's been remedied and rectified now. So in theory, and it's hoped, that Kevin De Bruyne could feel better than he has done for a long, long time. Discussions around, that risk and reward analogy, and, maybe Kevin De Bruyne should have went under the knife before this. But, you maybe want to take that chance that you can maybe get through games and months and see out, rather than spend his 4 to 5 to 6 months on the sidelines. But look, he's done all the hard work now. There's light at the end of the tunnel. And like I say, very similar to Ivan Toney, we could see a really strong finish to the season from Kevin De Bruyne, fully refreshed and focused. And undoubtedly, he's coming into a period where Manchester City, I think heading into that game with Everton, had only won 2 of 7 maybe Premier League matches. So they're not the dominant force that they have been in recent times in the Premier League. So he'll want to get back, and he'll want to, take City back up there and get them where he feels that they should be in first position.
And KDB needs to come back to help them with that. Let's go to the other side of Manchester, and HAALAND, he finally got a goal. Absolutely amazing, Ben. The festive period must have been amazing in the HAALAND household for one Premier League goal. But let's talk through the rest of the Reds. it's not great for them at the moment. They're not looking good at all. But they managed to somehow have a miracle turnaround against Aston Villa, which is very embarrassing for the Villains. But team news, let's talk through them.
Yeah, Eric Ten Hag, more or less the same squad as what we seen against Aston Villa. Prior to that game, we had a couple of minor setbacks. Luke Shaw being one of those, so we're not expecting him to be in the squad. We flagged this up a few weeks ago how sort of Eric Ten Hag thrashed Luke Shaw since he came back from that long-term hamstring injury. So it's no surprise to see that he's picked up another little setback. With regards to everybody else within that United squad, we're probably looking at in around mid-January. So the likes of Mason Mount, Casemiro, Leandro Martinez, Harry Maguire, all of those players, back around sort of mid-January. One player who could potentially return might be Anthony Martial. That's illness. That's a bit of a virus that's been going around. We've also seen Amad Diallo back on the training pitches and working with the group, although there's been no official word on when he will rejoin the rest of the squad on a match day.
There you go. So continuing over from Manchester United to Newcastle United, and we've discussed them a little bit earlier with the Liverpool situation, you guys taking on each other. You said a 1-1 draw, but what is the latest team news to help boost the team?
Yeah, this honestly, I really, really struggled with this Newcastle lineup, and there's a couple of positions up for grabs. I mean, for me, and it won't happen, but for me, I would probably drop Kieran Trippier. I just think he hasn't been on it, and I think he could maybe do with a little bit of, a few minutes out of the team. I certainly don't expect them to be involved in the FA Cup. And I would put Tino Livramento on that right-hand side and start with Dan Burn on the left. But, that's just my opinion. Elsewhere within the team, we know Fabian Shaw and Sven Botman have both just returned from injury. So I think what Newcastle have in their favour, they have that 6-day recovery period. If it had been a little bit closer, then maybe I would have put Dan Burn in there, maybe for Sven Botman. But like I say, with that 6 days recovery, I think he pretty much starts. Joe Linton has also returned midweek for that defeat against Nottingham Forest. I see the Brazilian back in the starting lineup, a massive asset to Newcastle. Up front, I'm looking at Alexander Isak, who's missing. So I may tinker around with this team. What else? Does he drop Callum Wilson? Almiron? Honestly, I really don't know. Would he even change his formation to go with a 4-2-3-1 and maybe drop Longstaff, have Guimaraes and Joe Linton as your two holding, and like I say, be a little bit more adventurous and put Isak and Wilson up top. It's a difficult decision, and one again I'm going to ponder maybe over the next hour or so, post recording. So there may be a change here.
John Dre has said I should ask Jason because Ben is biased. Who should I start, Gordon or Darwin? That's a tough one, isn't it? I will throw it to you, Ben, but I would choose Darwin just because Newcastle, the form, the underlying data, Newcastle had the worst XG conceded over the last 6 game weeks, and Newcastle's attack just hasn't been matching those attacking numbers. So Gordon, I think it was his first blank at home this whole season as well. I feel like Liverpool are in the better form, but obviously Darwin isn't in form. But he's in the better team, so more likely to. I don't know. Would you agree with that, Ben?
Yeah, I'd be leaning towards Darwin, in all honesty. Look, it's a tough game for us. Darwin obviously helped change the game against St James's Park earlier in the season against 10 men after Virgil van Dijk had been sent off. So he come on, and I think, did he grab 2? Did he grab both Liverpool goals on the day? The one in particular that sticks in my mind was an excellent finish. The one thing, if you were looking for something on Anthony Gordon, of course, he's a former Evertonian. So, a game against, the old enemy, as it were, in Liverpool, that's a massive incentive for him. So maybe, he'd want to go out there and have a point to prove. But look, if I was looking at it rationally, then Darwin would get the nod.
There you go. So continuing over to Nottingham Forest, what is the latest for them?
I mean, it's a tough one because Forest, obviously coming off the back of a fantastic performance, fully deserved, by the way, particularly on their second half performance or Newcastle's lack of a display in that second 45. Chris Wood coming back to haunt us with a hat-trick on his former stomping ground. Sangara, he's out of the game. So I'm bringing in Ryan Yates to add a little bit of bite into that midfield. I'm also throwing Willy Bolly straight back in there. He was very unfortunate to be sent off in Nuno Espirito Santo's first game in charge for an absolutely shocking, horrific decision to pick up a second bookable offence. And because it was a caution, they were unable to appeal that decision. So I've thrown him back in there alongside Murillo. And the other position that I see potentially up for grab is at left back. Aina started at St James's Park, and I was really inclined to leave him there. But listen to the chat from Forest supporters. Tari Toffolo has been one of the standout performers for Forest this season. He wasn't even in the matchday squad at St James's Park, but I understand that wasn't injury related, more of just managing his load. So it's difficult because Nuno Espirito Santos will have his own ideas. He will be, opinions will differ from that of Steve Cooper. So Toffolo I've went with, but like I say, Aina could be the one that gets the nod on the left-hand side.
So let's continue over to Sheffield United. And what is the latest for them?
Yeah, having heard from Chris Wilder as yet. So these are ones that potentially we could see some changes within the team. What we know is James McAtee cannot line up against his employees. He's on loan down at the Blades. So, is anybody going to be looking towards any of those Sheffield United players this weekend, given the fixture that they face a trip to the Etihad? Probably not. So maybe one just to overlook for the moment. We'll see how Chris Wilder wants to line up. Of course, they got a great result down at Villa Park, so we may expect something similar along those lines. But they're going to have to do it without the likes of Ahmed Hozic and Gustavo Hamer, who were both picked up a one-match ban after accumulating 5 yellow cards.
There you go. So on to Tottenham next, and the injury list just keeps growing and growing for them. Like we said at the start, Christian Romero has been added to that ever-growing number of those concerns. 9, I think, so far, injuries at the moment. So, there's a makeshift back line. As we said, going forward, there's going to be a makeshift forward line when Son goes off to, the tournament, and also Sarr as well, AFCON. So, yeah, what is it going to be happening in Game Week 20 against Bournemouth? What kind of considerations do people need to make when selecting their teams?
Yeah, certainly a change with regards to this starting 11 because Dejan Kulusevski picked up his 5th caution of the campaign during that defeat at Brighton. So he's actually out of the match. So there will be one enforced change there from Ange Postecoglou. Also, we've seen him favour Emerson Royal in recent times over the fit again, Eric Dyer. So he'd prefer to play Emerson Royal as an out-of-position centre-back, as opposed to your orthodox central defender in Eric Dyer, which probably, tells you a lot about what he thinks of Eric Dyer. And it wouldn't surprise me to see the former England international move on during that January window once maybe Tottenham get a couple of players back. But certainly that's Emerson for Dyer is probably a move I make. And like I say, also Kulusevski is a player who will miss out because he's suspended.
And just kind of continuing with the discussions around Tottenham, DeAndre wants to know what is the estimated time of return for James Maddison?
James Maddison shouldn't be too far away. Certainly expecting a return in January. He was following a very similar timeline to Mickey van der Ven. And there is an outside chance that he could actually feature in the FA Cup. It would be far too soon for James Maddison in that regard. I think we're probably looking at somewhere in the region of maybe 2 to possibly 3 weeks. So maybe that 14 to 21 days from this point. So, like I say, not too far away. So there's light at the end of the tunnel for Tottenham supporters.
Yes, and also Rodrigo Bentancur, he'll be back near middle to the end of the month as well.
Probably more towards the latter part of that. But again, we're talking about a player who's not just had this latest setback, but it's also coming off the back of that ACL reconstructive surgery. So he has very little competitive football over the last 12 months, which does slightly complicate things. And maybe, you need to manage that situation just a little bit more carefully, like I say, given the fact that he's suffered two fairly serious setbacks.
Yes, indeed. And it would be good to see him back because, we never like to see a player horrifically injured like that. Now, West Ham are up next for game week 20. Like you said, there's no confirmation on the Mohamed Kudus situation, and also Said Benrahma as well. He doesn't even know if he's going to the tournament, so we shall see about that. But this is the team that you've got at the moment. How kind of confident are you with this 11?
As confident as I can be. We have heard from David Moyes, but always we hear from the Hammers boss, relatively within sort of 12 to 14 hours after that final whistle. So it's very difficult to get a real handle of what's been going on. What we do know is, that the players will still have to be fully assessed following that win at the Emirates. So Naif Agard, he's missed the last 3 games, I think it is, with a virus, certainly the last 2. And also Kurt Zouma was missing from the matchday squad last year. There's been a bit of a bug going through that Hammers camp, which, forced David Moyes to give the players, a few days rest and away from the group, just to try and sort of want to help recover, refresh and recharge, but also to try and, quell that, that bug and so it didn't affect too many more players. Ogbonna and Mavropanis, they were pretty much untroubled really at Arsenal. They weren't put under any major duress. So I do expect those 2 players to return. Certainly, I wouldn't expect Naif Agard to be playing. If anybody was going to disrupt that, it would be Zouma. Like I say, he's been out just a shorter period of time. We also seen Paquetá substituted around about that half hour mark, pulled up in the warm-up. It looked to be a distal hamstring problem, which is lower down the back of the thigh, but actually it was confirmed post-match by David Moyes that it was actually a knee injury right at the back of the knee. Now that was to be assessed, but what I would say at this point, although we're hoping it's not too serious, like I say, he played nigh on 25-30 minutes with that it's not too serious, but we're waiting for scan results, so that's a question mark, which is why we brought Benrahma in. We have tweaked that Hammers lineup ever so slightly.
Interesting indeed. Jandre reminding me very painfully that Mavropanos is an old Arsenal player and he scored against us. So we'll quickly move on there from the heartache. Wolves, the final one. Now, something that did get mentioned in your Athletic Q&A was Pedro Neto. And obviously he's not in the 11 here, but I thought I would raise it so that you could talk to people on here about it as well. Some people were kind of saying, oh, well, Hwang Hee-chan's going off now. Neto will slot straight back in, but it's much more complicated than that, isn't it, Ben?
Yeah, and even Gary O'Neill alluded to it, because obviously that was a line of question that was directed about the return of Pedro Neto. Everybody's seen him return to the matchday squad midweek, and the expectation was, well, maybe that he wouldn't start, but he would certainly get minutes from the bench. That didn't happen. And Gary O'Neill said, there is a difference between the players on the training pitches and then being thrown back into Premier League action. And after almost, I think it was around about 2 months out, again, you've got to be very, very careful. And if you're looking at the likes of Hee-chan, who's going away at the Asian Cup, then you don't want to throw Pedro Neto back in there too soon for him to only suffer another setback. So it could be Kuna that maybe leads the Wolves attack in the absence of Hee-chan once he leaves, with Pedro Neto getting minutes from the bench, maybe in sort of maybe the next 2 or personally, maybe 3 games. He could start in the FA Cup because typically, it isn't the exact sort of same intensity as you were in the Premier League, and maybe a start in the FA Cup is more realistic with coming off early in that second half. So it remains to be seen. But of course, we will expect to be involved and carefully integrated within that Wolves team.
Well, there you go. Final question from Jay Andre. He says, who is your captain this game week?
You lead the way, Jason, first up, because I haven't even looked at my team.
I've got Julian Alvarez because I just think that Manchester City can do one against Sheffield United. Yes, Man City haven't been as good as they have been, but it's Sheffield United, they're at home. And I like that Alvarez is through the middle. Yes, at times, he's not the traditional striker. He's more like false nine, dropping back, creating. But, he's creating one of the best attacks in the league. And he's also on penalties, which is a great kind of bonus, and some of the set pieces as well. But what about you, Ben?
Yeah, look, I'm leaning towards Alvarez as well, but if you want to sort of spice things up a little bit in terms of looking at alternatives, I do quite like the fixture for Aston Villa at home to Burnley. Again, they've suffered that little bit of a downturn, so they're going to need to bounce back. So Ollie Watkins is certainly in me thinking, given the record of Liverpool at Anfield against Newcastle and Mo Salah wanting to maybe bow out on a high note, Mo Salah comes into the thinking. Um, and I think realistically, that's probably it. Or even maybe I've got Jared Bowen as well against Brighton. As great as Brighton have been and the results that they're getting, they do concede a lot of goals. And Bowen playing, in that striking role, he's been playing fantastic. So, yeah, just a couple of more considerations there. So, realistically, I may be looking at Alvarez or Bowen, Salah as an outside shot, and maybe further down the pecking order would be Ollie Watkins.
There you go. Good little run through of all the captains there, Ben. Great insights as always. And we wish everybody the best of luck, the best of health. And I guess we'll be seeing you all in 2024 with our first broadcast then. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure to give us a like, share. And we will see you all very, very soon. So have a happy and healthy New Year's celebration.